one of my teachers talked me into buying a drum set. And that's one kid in particular who really wanted it. But he played that in 4 or 5 different bands that performed for our school at different times. Yeah. And the fact that it's electronic, it can be used by other people that are creating music and not just him. And I look at how valuable that was. And that's not a decision of how I would have spent a few $1,000s of my budget. But when, yeah, I've got a kid and a teacher saying this will add value to what we're doing without us having to have a music teacher. It's just something that, that giving them that autonomy to make that decision and then me finding
Yeah.
the way to do it. That's the easy, you know, that's actually the fun part of my job too.
So if you were to design or share your characteristics of what I don't know if the word perfect school is, what an ideal school should be, I wonder what he would say those characteristics should be. I think people talk about student agency. They talk about kids doing deep learning. They talk about really, hands-on, very active learning, student-centered, all those kind of phrases that sometimes get, used, but we really don't know what that means or have a clear sense of what that is. And as much as it doesn't seem like those ever exist outside of a few pockets, I know that the conversation I have today with Principal Dave Truss of the Inquiry Hub and Open Learning in Coquitlam School Division in British Columbia really does exemplify those kinds of ideals. And while Dave would never, ever suggest he has the ideal school because he quite honestly and openly shares the struggles that comes with running a school like that. However, what I do know about Dave and this school and what's happening there is pretty close to the ideals, I think. And again, we're never going to have a completely ideal school in the sense that kids are not ideal and they're complicated and they're human beings. So, but to the extent that we could have uh, the kind of learning that I think so many aspire to, I think we can look to places like the Inquiry Hub to see what that's like. So Dave and I have a great conversation. He's a dear friend, an old friend of mine. He's been one of the very few of us who have continued to blog for a decade plus, and that we talk about that as well as challenges and some of his experiences and times as a leader in many capacities. So enjoy today's conversation with Principal Dave Truss. Describe what you do every day.
I actually am the principal of 2 schools, Inquiry Hub Secondary, a very small school with just over 70 students. And then Coquitlam Open Learning, our online school that services somewhere between 4 and 5,000 students a year, but most of them are taking 1 or 2 additional courses to a full load that they're taking at their high school. And it's at a distance, but all of those teachers work out of the same building, most of them, other than one specific program on digital literacy that I run in all the high schools, where we use those high school teachers. They're 2 very different programs, and I describe them as I have 2 jobs. I love them both, and they both take 60% of my time. But the Inquiry Hub is a school that was created 12 years ago when Stephen Whiffen, the principal of Coquitlam Open Learning at the time, he noticed that there was a movement of students coming onto online, and they didn't want online. They just did not want an experience where they were going into a school, doing 70 or 80-minute blocks of a course, doing that again, having lunch and repeating after that. And that's not a knock on high schools. High schools have a lot of opportunity to provide things, but that learning experience isn't necessarily what someone wants when they're a more self-directed learner. And so we developed the Inquiry Hub. And basically, the idea behind it is if you're a self-directed learner that is passionate about learning, what we'll do is, unlike a big high school where you get an amazing assortment of electives with these high people and with high expertise, we can't do that in a small school. So we actually wrote courses, the board approved courses called Foundations of Inquiry. And so what we did was we developed an elective that was all about process. So it doesn't matter what your content is. It matters that you are going through the process of learning how to dive deep into an inquiry project, a passion project that's your interest. And if you go to inquiryhub.org and go to you can see some of the projects that students have done. And those are some highlights, but we have an example where someone sewed their first skirt that they've ever owned. We have two boys who created their own business, and we had someone who fundraised and ended up raising over $50,000 for Covenant House, a home for disenfranchised youth. And so those are starting your own business, writing your first computer program, creating music. We had one student who, over a series of years, wrote an entire musical. And so what students do is they start with small inquiries and they get incrementally bigger. And then in grade 11 and 12, they actually do year-long inquiries called IDS, Independent Directed Studies. And so that's the reason they come, but they also get in the sense of a traditional high school degree. It's not an alternate program. It's just an alternative approach. And so our teachers are very into students working collaboratively. Students learn Scrum, which is a project management system that is used a lot in the tech industry and in business. And we adapt it slightly. It's not the same kind of project, but I'll ask you, what's usually one of the biggest complaints about group work in schools?
People don't pull their
Yeah.
weight.
Yeah. And then someone else is doing all the work. And what
Right.
Scrum does is it makes the tasks very visible and then weighs them. And then students take turns taking different positions. So in a school project, not everyone's going to create a PowerPoint. There might be only one person in charge of that. Someone else is working on design and content and research. And so they break the tasks up into different pieces. And a lot of the work is done with students presenting components of the required curriculum to each other and teaching each other. And so students end up with a lot of time where it's not they're sitting and listening to a teacher in the front of the room, but they're actually working in collaborative groups and presenting and teaching each other as part of the way the learning happens here. And so to be a student here, you have to be someone who's willing to work collaboratively, and you have to be someone who is self-directed. And when you have that lump of sometimes 2 hours in a day, where you might not have a teacher telling you this is exactly what you're doing, you're actually using that time in an effective way.
So it sounds to me, and you're talking about students that also, so they bring that kind of a mindset to it, but then also they have it sounds like they have a lot of agency in their learning,
Quite a bit. And that's one of
more than a traditional high school experience would likely offer.
that's absolutely true. Like one of the challenges we have is when kids are writing scholarships and they describe what they do as a leader in the school. They say, I help run the leadership club. And you think of what that means in a school. For them, it means like for Halloween next week, they're designing the entire week for what the events are and what's happening and organizing. There's a live action role play that is created for that Halloween day that students are. It's not just the teacher at the kind of directing the leaders; it's them actually running the show, and that's the kind of stuff where they do so much. And then when you just describe it as I'm doing this, it doesn't sound like they're doing nearly as much as they are, but they have amazing agency here. And so one of my favorite things that I describe about my job that I love is oftentimes when an issue comes to a principal, it's disciplinary and it's how are we going to handle this sticky situation. I spend a lot of my time when kids come to my office trying to get to yes, because they're coming with these big ideas and sometimes they're just too much and it's like not something we can actually do. And so my role is let's not shut them down completely. Let's figure out where the yes is inside of this big scheme or idea that they have so that we can actually continue to give them agency even though that we may not be able to. When I had a kid wanting to bring an entire car into our school to work on it. I There's so many safety issues and concerns that I can't
Right.
possibly do something like that. But he can flush out a carburetor and bring that inside and then work on that. And that becomes something that's where the yes comes in. But we don't have a shop. We don't have a shop teacher with that kind of expertise to be bringing in hoists and doing all that kind of stuff. He can work on a carburetor. He can bring in a car door and work on the electronics of
Right.
the window and so on. Right. So, yeah.
So your school and what I've known about you, it's has similar vibes as big picture learning. Dennis Litke, I can't remember the name of the school. It was another similar model in Iowa. And there's these pockets of these kinds of schools all over. Will Richardson and others talk about how important, like how that's what school should be, is like kids should have this kind of agency. This is the kind of learning that many in the whatever school reform movement have talked about. If that's true, why are there only 70 kids in this as opposed to
Yeah.
the thousands of others in
Yeah.
high school who are not part of this learning?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, number one, my vision for the school is it wouldn't actually get over 100 anyway. Right. And so one of the things that we have to look at is that capacity to build that community. Right? To me, our school should be a school in a school. That would be
Mhm.
the ideal
Sure.
situation. And while saying that, I don't think we would have got where we got today if we were a school in a school and had to follow. So I appreciate that we were pulled out. But if you're looking at expanding it as a vision, because one of the things that we require is we actually do interviews and look for self-directed students. And the reason we do that isn't because we're trying to say we just want the cream of the crop. And that's absolutely not the case. And in fact, as a percentage, we have more IEPs, individual education plans, as a percentage of our body than most schools do. And we have students that come twice exceptional with they're gifted, but then their organizational skills and capacity are way off. And so one of the things is we need we need a strong student services support within the school because you despite saying we're interviewing and want kids to come in that are self-directed, I don't know any grade 9. I don't know any adults that are completely self-directed, much less a grade 9. And so one of the pieces is we don't have a focus on continued growth because we recognize that we have a capacity to provide this. And if we were in a bigger school that we weren't relying on a small school's student services and different things, then I think that we could become bigger. But it baffles me as well because I don't think enough people even in the district end up coming. And it like this year we lost about 4 or 5 kids that ended up going to like the RIB program instead of us that were right. But I look at the two programs and go, you couldn't make two programs more different. And it shocks me that's the kind of kid that's applying for our school because the regimen of what that requires. I actually worked for a half a year in the IB school before moving to vice principal. And I was shocked to see the students that I taught in middle school skipping classes to do homework for other classes and telling me how excited they were to write their extended essay in September and then telling me they hadn't started it in January because their workload was so heavy. And whereas at Inquiry Hub, we had a kid graduate a couple of years ago. He spent like 300 hours on one of his independent directed studies and 500 plus in the other. And it's only required 100 hours. And when you look at how he was able to follow his passions and then go on to UBC computer science, and it's pretty amazing to see what that difference is. And so I don't know, like to me, those are such different things. And yet we go through the whole interview process. We love this kid. And then they're saying, I want IB. And I'm like, I don't know.
Well, I think it would suggest to me is they just want
Yeah.
something different. They just don't see traditional schooling as this is not giving me what I want. So I'll go whatever direction is not
Yeah.
what a regular. But the thing I wonder about, Dave, is so I don't know. And that's my wondering is like of the 1,000 high school kids in Coquitlam or any other district, what percentage of them would be interested? And again, nothing is for
Yeah.
everybody. So I get that. And I think that the traditional schooling is not as there are people that you and I both read who think it's a terrible experience. I don't believe
No.
that at all because we all know the people that are working in these places and they're wonderful,
Yeah.
caring people. However, they may not have the capacity and disposition to do what you are doing and your team are doing. And so that may be where part of the problem is that we don't have enough people experienced or curious or given the opportunity to develop the kind of traits that are needed to facilitate inquiry learning.
Yeah,
I
and
don't
it
know.
takes a special breed of teacher, and one of the things is the 2 of the teachers that are here started with us as our first 2 teachers, and it's just one of those things where when you've gone into this environment. I remember going to see a teacher at High Tech High that had been there since, well, I think the start, when he was just saying, "I couldn't imagine going and teaching anywhere else," and I have 2 younger teachers now that I know the baton's being passed to them because they couldn't imagine working somewhere else. But it's also not an easy job. You go to a high school, in a year, you'll deal with 7 courses out of 8, like 8 blocks. That's the way it works in Coquitlam. And chances are 3 of those are gonna be repeats where you're doing the same subject, right? So you have 5 preps for 7 courses, and then some of them are easy, but that I call that the average in a high school, right? I have a teacher that teaches 14 preps. He's got 14 different classes, right? And another one, he's at 14 as well. And one of the ones he's teaching this year is drama. He's never taught drama before, right? But that's where the interest in the students are. 4 or 5 years ago, he'd never taught marketing. He was our STEAM teacher, and he gave up math and took marketing. So that was the M in his STEAM. And he then, by halfway through the year, when he's walking around with marketing books in his hand all day long, he's saying, I think this is the most important course I've ever taught. And
Wow.
so they're just amazing educators who, like, they're looking at their interests, their student interests, and they're willing to just add things to their plate. I have a teacher now, and he added a teaching education course that's brand new and that just came out. And he's got 5 students interested, and he added it to his prep. Right. And it's just one of those things where he saw the interest. He thought this is a great opportunity for kids to do more than just be a peer tutor. And so that's what he did. And so when you get to work in a collaborative environment like that, I think that's one of the things for me, I'm probably most proud of is creating that environment.
Yeah.
I've got a Pro D coming this Friday, and the entire agenda has been developed by my staff. And so that's one of those opportunities where my other school, that's not the case. I'm quite involved in doing that planning. But for Inquiry Hub, I have to take a step back because the same way you want to foster students having that autonomy and that ability to create things, you have to do that with your teachers as well when they're ready for it. And I have a community that's completely ready for it. They value my contribution. It's not like they're pushing me aside, but I also recognize that where they want to go is a really good place, and I'm better if they feel like they have the autonomy and the control to make those decisions rather than for me to throw in my 2 cents because of my title.
So
Yeah.
anecdotally, of course, you can't speak to this any more than that. Would you say your teachers are happier or have greater sense of well-being in their job than the average high school teacher in British Columbia?
I would say so. Yeah. And I don't think that,
I mean, the fact that you said you have 2 teachers who've been there from the
yeah.
start, they've obviously found this is their wheelhouse. This is where they wanna be. Again, I even appreciate the differences in fewer kids, but more
Yeah.
subjects. There's always
Yeah.
trade-offs, right? And so you probably have to decide which of those things you wanna do, but that's what I'd be curious about. It sounds like as much agency as the students have, the teachers have an agency in the fact they can just they can pick up a
Yeah.
marketing course or teach a drama
Yeah.
class as
Yeah.
well.
And that's inspired by their interests and the student interests. And that's what I really love, right? And we can't offer everything to everyone. Yeah. I would love to be a little bit bigger and have a music teacher because I have so many students that are into music and composing and writing their own music. But we have a small school, a small budget. And last year, one of my teachers talked me into buying a drum set. And that's one kid in particular who really wanted it. But he played that in 4 or 5 different bands that performed for our school at different times. Yeah. And the fact that it's electronic, it can be used by other people that are creating music and not just him. And I look at how valuable that was. And that's not a decision of how I would have spent a few $1,000s of my budget. But when, yeah, I've got a kid and a teacher saying this will add value to what we're doing without us having to have a music teacher. It's just something that, that giving them that autonomy to make that decision and then me finding
Yeah.
the way to do it, that's the easy, you know, that's actually the fun part of my job too.
This episode is brought to you by Advanced Learning Partnerships, also known as ALP. We are a professional learning consulting group that serves communities across North America. We are partners, designers, and agents for change. You can learn more about the work we do at alplearn.com. And now back to the show. I want to talk about blogging in a
Sure.
second, but because I think that's probably how you and I
Yeah.
probably connected, and I don't know that I can pinpoint, but just thinking about innovation slash technology and inquiry, do you, over the last 10 years or so that you've been part of this work, what have you seen change from when you started to where we are now with that concept of, because there's, I think those days in the late 2000s where people were pretty excited about this and there was a buzz and an energy, and maybe there still is, but I don't know, like how have things changed in your perspective in terms of what this looks and feels like?
If you're talking about blogging specifically,
No, I'm not talking. I want to talk about that later. I'm just talking about
innovation,
innovation and that kind of concept because, and I position that because I would have used that word a lot more readily 10 years ago in terms of what we want. I don't hear people using it quite as
no.
much. And I don't know if that's what I'm trying to get at. Has that sort of appetite for new and innovative uses of technology and or not just necessarily technology, but innovation in general. Do you think that's changed over the last 10 years?
I think it has exploded, but it's changed. And so, like you and I, we got together, I think somewhere around 2006, 2007, in the sense of being connected online. And what it was, people used to read blogs, comment on blogs. And I look back at my old blog paradigms, and there were full on discussions inside after a post, and people commenting, writing their own posts as a response, and then sharing and having these discussions. And that continued on to Twitter, which at that time was just an amazing opportunity for learning and exchanging of information. And then that's where I'm going with this was I think we've lost something in the interactions that I used to see that were really rich. I felt like knew you as a person, a human being. I knew you as an educator. And I think it was 7, 8 years before I met you face to face. And in some ways, I knew you more than I knew some of the teachers across the hall as a teacher, right? And that's a pretty powerful statement to say that I'm working side by side with someone that I know less than someone 2 provinces away and I can't remember where you are.
Or
two,
two?
two provinces away, Saskatchewan. That was rich and it was a really powerful time. And then we moved into an era where people were sharing in different ways. And it became this thing where the communication was all about retweets and speed. And this, I would post something and it would be retweeted faster than someone could actually read the content. And I would sit there and go, what's happening here? This is not about the same conversation that we used to have. And I would say that that responding and communication on blogs has really gone down. And I say that as an avid blogger who has blogged every day since July 2019. All right. I have my 20 or 30 fans. And but
That Not many. That's more than I have. So that's
That might be an exaggeration myself, but my point there is that the communication now for me, it's a writing exercise. It's a creativity exercise. It's a pure enjoyment thing that I know that if I don't commit to writing daily, I don't write. Right. And so that becomes a very personal experience. So I don't know that's going to come back. I see podcasting just exploding. I am someone who I don't read anymore. I listen to audiobook exclusively. I don't remember the last time I read a paper book in about, I'd say 5 or 6 years. And if I come across a dense piece of writing, I go voice to text and I just use the immersive technology that's available to me. And so I've adjusted that. And part of that is I think I have some learning challenges myself, and I'm a very slow reader. And I would rather hear it and I consume things and hold on to it better when I hear it compared to reading. And I'm excited about the way technology is allowing for people to choose their mode. And I think that's very powerful. But to go full circle, that's like the talking about the blogging and so on. But to go to technology now, I'm very excited about AI. I understand that it's going to cause tremendous amount of challenges in education because we went through a phase like this already. And what happened is um, Google came out and then it was all the craze was writing and all the presentations were about create projects that are Google proof. And so we've gone through this cycle of, oh my goodness, look at this look at Wikipedia. It just gives you all the information and people are just going to that. And how do you stop kids from, instead of how do you get kids to use it appropriately? It's how do you stop kids from using it? And now we're seeing that with AI. And the reality though, that is transformational is we're reaching a point where if you were to say, like you did with Google, create a project that's Google proof. If you say create a project that's AI proof, I'd be hard pressed to come up with a really good project where if you were leaving kids on their own to do it, that they would not be able to and somehow use it in a way that if it's not that even if you are aware that they're cheating, like and then we're seeing it now. We're seeing law. I just saw recently um, a law case in the US where, a kid with an outstanding GPA was accused of using AI when he didn't.
that's
And so now this person's entire opportunity for scholarships and top universities is being taken away because of academic integrity when the kid didn't actually cheat. And so we're going to see some real challenges with technology, but I see it as exciting too, right? Because here's the reality. I taught grade 8 math, and my last couple of years were in teaching grade 8 math were some of my most amazing and most frustrating simultaneously because I had students doing grade 9 math. I had students who would who weren't ready for grade 9, but they were advanced and they would write a pretest. And if they got an A, then I would give them challenge work and they didn't have to do the unit. And then I would work with the smaller group of kids who needed grade 8 math, right? Sounds great, except for when the grade 9s are stuck on a question. The grade 8, the ones that you gave challenging work, the challenging work was too hard for them, and you're trying to teach a lesson to the rest of them, and they're now off task because you haven't planned the. They're not in that area of challenge. So the days it went well, I felt like the best teacher in the world, and the days it didn't, I felt like, why am I even bothering? So I look at those days and I go, how would those be different now? And the reality is that there are math programs now that meet kids right where their needs are, right? And that doesn't eliminate me as a teacher. That allows me to go because not every kid's going to find that ideal place. And so when I become that teacher circulating and assisting kids that where they are and the technology is doing the same, how powerful is that compared to sending home 20 questions of homework that are too easy for some and too frustrating for others. And then what's being accomplished when kids at home practicing something wrong 20 times and they come back and then, to me, there's opportunities for the technology to help us with the content so that now we can help with those amazing skills that the kids are showing. Like, yeah, when you come visit, it would be fantastic if you came on a presentation day to see some of the presentations the kids do, because we focus on those kind of skills, right? Our grade nines right now are doing color boards for to understand how to create really good presentations that don't distract with their colors. And now that was a couple weeks ago. The one that they're doing now is that they're doing one is focusing on being minimalist, and these are things that will help them with their presentations. And I look at some of the presentations that kids give, and I'm a little embarrassed by my own slideshows because I see what they're able to do and the way that they're able to articulate and express their ideas, right? Because those are the skills that if you come and visit our school, that's the stuff that the kid that I didn't ask you to talk to, that you talk to, that articulates what they're doing and expresses it in a way that shows that they're thoughtful about the way they're going about their process. Those skills will apply to any job they have in the future, right? And whether or not they're using AI to assist them in that isn't the point. But if you're banning AI, if you're blocking it and they don't know how to use it and they don't know how to learn with AI and not from AI, I think that's when you start to see the technology move that we're moving into, where we're now doing exactly what we did with Google. We're becoming the policeman instead of the educator.
Right. The difference now, though, one
Yeah.
of them is the fact that in those days, access was somewhat more challenging because every kid didn't have a smartphone. Very few kids had their own
Yes.
laptops. Now, you can't stop this because every kid has this in their hands. And
Yeah.
so you can do all you want at your level. And I feel that's been my experience is that more districts and schools are quickly coming to that realization that, okay, that's not going to work. So now what? Yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting next little
And
while as we sort out. And again, though, the interesting thing you mentioned teachers being able to devote more time to interacting with kids. And that comes from somebody who's running an inquiry school and from myself, somebody who believes in that. But there are teachers who don't want that taken away because they don't want the content because no, let me just stand up and do my thing because I'm super comfortable with delivering
yeah,
content, less comfortable with walking around trying to help 30 kids with 30 different needs because that's hard. That's not easy to do. It's much easier if I just stand at the front and
yeah,
talk at them. So for those teachers, which I think I would argue there are fewer of those than there were 10
yeah.
years ago, but for those that are still in love with that role the
You
last
reminded
for
me
long.
of someone we knew mutually. I haven't seen him in a while, but Darren Carapachoa. And he shared once where he was in a class circulating, an administrator walked in and just started talking to him. And he's sorry, I'm teaching. He goes, no, you're not. Like, you're not front room. And he's, no, I'm teaching. This is teaching. And the
Right,
administrator was
right.
lost, going, no, if you were in the front of the room,
Kids are
I
working
wouldn't have
in groups.
bothered you.
You could leave them alone.
Now, Dean, I'm really interested. What's your thoughts on like where the technology is now?
I would say it's still in the early phases of because people are wanting to rush to let's get this particular software or let's implement in this way. I think we're still learning, and I'm really trying to put the brakes on people. There's nothing wrong with those that want to try certain things and have some insight on that. But I think as a whole, we need to support the broader audience in terms of their literacy around this and what this means because there's still lots of misconceptions. And then I was in a couple of high schools in Surrey about a month ago, and I just asked how many have even started exploring this, and there was probably a quarter of them that haven't done anything with it at all. And that's not, and I don't say that in a
No, no, I
disparaging way.
understand.
Listen, they're busy people. It's not part of their world. So that I think that has to be acknowledged that I think we need to work a bit more collectively, which is the work that I've been doing to help gain some understanding of this so that we can start wrestling with some of the ethical questions. And to your point earlier around when is it aiding and helping a student learn And when might it be robbing us? Like, I just finished writing a blog post, and I could have easily used AI to write it for me. And I just, for me, it didn't feel right. And I knew now here's where the blurry line comes in. So I've got Grammarly running in the background, which is
Yep.
AI telling me, oh, you might want to use this word or that word. That I'm using it already. But in terms of actually my voice and my ideas, I didn't feel comfortable with that. And those lines are blurry. They're not the same for everybody. I don't blame anybody from using it. Interesting story. So I'm teaching a grad class tonight, in fact, in a couple hours. And this is the first time I've taught since 2019. And so I've been very excited to say to them, hey, I don't care how you use this, but let's be transparent about it and let's figure out what makes sense. And I got a direct message from one student that said, yeah, I'm getting some comments on my blog that I'm pretty sure are AI generated. I don't even want to
Yeah.
respond to them, which I just raised the question because I didn't say you couldn't
Yeah.
do that, but that now it becomes like, how do I feel about that? And I understand it from the person who maybe did it because they're trying to, in a compliance way, trying to comment on blogs. And so they copy paste. What's a good comment for
Yeah.
this blog? And then they put it in there. And I think we're missing the point on that. But at the same time, there are times when compliance, there's a lot of things that we have to knock out in a day where boy, AI could get rid of that. I don't have time. Like I had an issue today where I had an email to respond to. I was like, I'm not quite sure how to say this in a way that doesn't come across in a way I don't want it to. And it gave me, oh yeah, that makes sense. I wouldn't have necessarily thought of that. So I think we're in that stage where it's early. So we're starting it out. I'm really interested in the good conversations we're having. And I am not on any side of this fence. I am not pro AI. I can see all the bad things. I go down rabbit holes all the time that scare the crap out of me. And I go, oh, this is going to be
Yeah.
bad. And it could be, and it will. Bad things are going to happen, already are happening.
Yeah.
As I think you and I are both biased towards a bit more of an optimistic, hopeful
Yeah,
disposition. There's hope.
let's share something that I think when looking at a district level, uh, that's I've really changed my mind on, and you mentioned it about not rushing to the newest tool. Like I was someone as an educator, whatever the newest tool was, I was trying it. When I had kids blogging until the blogging didn't work in our school network. And then I just switched to wikis. It was just like, oh, this doesn't
Mhm.
work. I'll just do this. And I just had the kids on this ride with me, and it was fantastic. And I was all about whatever the tool is that's best for the job, go ahead and do it. Our district took a different approach, and they said, look, we're going to become really good in just a few tools. And they've gone we're a Microsoft school district, and we have an amazing relationship with Microsoft. And I look and I go, like, there are some tools out there that may be better than PowerPoint, but PowerPoint's a pretty powerful tool, and it's getting better, and it has a lot of immersive things that you can do. And the AI is getting embedded. Copilot for over 13 years old, our network, I've got a teacher saying bye to me. Our network is it's set up so that anything you do on Copilot doesn't go back, isn't fed back into the system. And so if we're going to use AI in a school, we're going to use Copilot. Could you find a tool better than Copilot? Yes. Is it necessary to find it? Is it necessary to put students' private data into something and have them share something that now we don't know? Because our district has made sure that we've created this. And then when the it doesn't work, the techs don't need to be expert in 17,000 different new and dynamic things. So I went from a teacher who was like, whatever the tool is, we should have a right to use it, to going, it makes sense for an organization to really focus and say, hey, these are new. We're going to pick these ones and we're going to do them really well. If you're really interested in something else, here's the mechanism to go and get it. And I'm really impressed by our district approach there. And I know I would not have been a fan of it 15 years ago, 18 years ago as a teacher. But I look now and I go, this is a really smart approach for not racing ahead and not just jumping on the next thing, but recognizing, hey, let's really have an opportunity to explore some of these tools and see what they can do as educators.
Absolutely. Yeah. This podcast has leadership in the
Yeah.
title. So let me ask you, can you tell me about a leadership challenge that you've experienced? Just one, probably a lot, but one leadership challenge that kind of comes to mind and that sort of tested you that you think about a lot.
The one I think about a lot is I have a friend and mentor, Dave Sands, and we were having a conversation. And I think I was a brand new administrator at the time. And we were talking about just managing all the stuff that comes at you. And he said, stuff, not people. And I was like, what? He goes, stuff, not people. And what do you mean? He goes, Things are going to fall off the back of your truck. Make sure it's stuff and not people." And I really love that metaphor because one of the challenges, my biggest challenge is that management of my day, management of email, management of my tasks can way overweigh my things I do for leadership. And that it's not an either or. You can't be a leader and say, I'm an educational leader and that's all I do. Right. And you can't be someone who all you do is be very effective at the tasks. My entire career has been about my main struggle is that balance because there is no balance. There isn't. I would love to say there is. There are times I get so consumed. I could spend my entire day in my office and spend another 2, 3 hours in here, not see a single person. And would I be doing my job? Right. I could also ignore my office and let my email get to 300. And then am I doing my job? No. And that dance is,
Yeah.
until I retire, that will be my challenge. Yeah.
I heard a good word the other day that replaces that idea of workplace balance, and that's
Right.
harmony. And I think I like it because if you think about harmony, you have a lead, right? The lead vocal takes control and these other parts support it. And that could be different and be determining what you lead with and what your strengths are and what you want to focus on. But you have these other things that kind of are there and figuring out that
Yeah.
harmony. You mentioned Dave, you mentioned
Yeah.
Stephen Witham, both excellent leaders that I know in
Yeah.
Coquitlam. And that may be who you want to shout out, but I want you to shout out show your gratitude to somebody in education, one
Okay.
person
Since I already
today.
gave you Dave and Stephen, I think I would go to my wife. She's a head teacher in a elementary school. And what she's done in that school as a school leader is just phenomenal. And so I think sometimes we always look at the person who's like climbing the ladder and say, "Oh, look at what they're doing." And we forget that the leaders inside of a school, like I told you there's a teacher here for 12, there's been a teacher here for two of them for 12 years. One of them could go on and like he would soar just being like a mentor teacher somewhere else. And maybe one day he'll do that. He's doing in the school is amazing. My wife is like that. She is created in she used to be a middle school teacher. And when I brag about my wife, it's not just this remote thing. She worked as a teacher in my school for 2 years when I was a principal in China, and she was one of my teachers. And we worked collaboratively as teachers in another school for 5 years. So it's not just I'm telling you about my home life. I've actually seen her in action. I've never seen a teacher who can make so many kids excel. It's like as a teacher, I think I was really good with the gifted. I was really good with the strugglers, and the other students, I got them through. But my focus was the highs and the lows to make sure they had a positive experience. My wife seems to be able to do that for every kid. I think that at the end of the year, every kid in her class, no matter where they are, exceeds what they thought they could do. And this is the part that's the evidence based and not just the husband. Um,
Hmm.
this year alone, we're only this is you know middle no, October 22nd, but it's October 22nd. And this year, she's received 6 or 7 thank yous from parents and previous students. All right. Like this year, I would say in my 25 years as knowing her as a teacher, she's received hundreds of those emails, sometimes from a kid when they're 25 saying, I can't believe what a jerk I was, but you were the teacher that believed in me and pushed me. And then in her school, she actually has all of her grade 4, 5 split teachers. They meet every Monday by choice and plan collaboratively for the week. and then they share resources in a way that you normally only see in middle schools. And so my hat tip is to her. I wish I was as good an educator as my wife. And I can say the same thing about the way she leads as well. So you don't have you
Nice.
don't have to have
Well,
the title. And I think sometimes I'd like to go on with one other thing because you asked me a question that we haven't shared yet, and that's what would you tell a 25-year-old teacher, right? And
ahead.
I would love to share that because I've thought a lot about it. I asked Dave Sands, one of my mentors, and he said that they should seek a mentor and not just have a mentor be chosen for you, but seek someone out who you really like. And I like that answer. But
That's
but
a
the
great
thing I
answer.
would say too is when you're an entrepreneur or something like that, you're always talking about building and doing the next thing and climbing that ladder. When you're in a career like education and you want to stay in education, which I hope people do, there's too many people that quit after 5 years or less. But if you want to be in this for a long time, there's no race. I now am an educator who had 9.5 years as a teacher, which seemed like a good time to move on to administration. But I'm now in my 17 plus years as an administrator, right? And I look back and I go, if I were to change something, I would do more at my school. I was a leader of a school, but at an amazing school, middle school, where I think almost half the people I started with are administrators because they were just those kind of people. And it was the best possible experience I could have to begin with. And I watched all the things that I did, but I could have stayed there and done more, right? I could have created more opportunity, more leadership. I could have been more of a mentor to younger teachers before getting the admin job because I would say that 17 years now as an administrator, it's hard to maintain that enthusiasm that I maintained as a teacher. And I would say, be great at your school. Yeah, sure. Do other things that if you want to get noticed in the district and step up where you see an opportunity. But in some ways, your first 10 years, put your visor on and be awesome at that level. That would be my advice.
That's awesome. No, that's great. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Both those shares. So, just fun questions as we wind up
Okay.
our time together here. What are you? I was going to say, what are you reading? But you already told me you don't read.
Well,
So, what are you
yeah,
listening to
yeah.
these days?
So what the book I'm listening to is Cultures of Growth, which I forget the name of the author, but it's one of Dueck's students, and it's just looking at how more inclusive, more collaborative, more innovative schools are ones where there's less of a fixed mindset and more of a growth mindset. And I'm almost on that one. My next book I don't know a lot about, but I've heard it's good, and it's Innovator's Dilemma. But the last about 3 weeks, I've been off of audiobooks and I've been on to podcasts. And I'm a big fan of Diary of a CEO,
Okay,
and
yeah.
it's Steve Bartlett. And I love his
Yeah.
line of questioning. I love the guests he has. And I'm listening to one now with, blanked out his name, Trevor Noah. And there's a quote on friendship that he just shared that was just such a gem. And I love looking at business podcasts and other podcasts and seeing how they connect to either my personal life or to education.
So if you want to listen to one of Diary of a CEO, you might want to listen to the one with Mo Goddard, where he talks about
Okay.
AI. That's a little more scary
Yeah.
though, like it's
Yeah.
because Mo Goddard has that vibe to it. What about when you're not listening to stuff and you just want to unwind, veg? I don't know. Do you want streaming stuff that comes across?
Mine varies. So right now, my wife and I just started, it's an older series, but it's called Last of Us. And it's a kind of a zombie apocalypse. Yeah, and that's totally not her style, not something, but what we've been told by numerous people that, at least watch 3 episodes and you'll get hooked. And then I'm listening to one that's personally when I'm on my own, I've started the series Apocalypse, Ancient Apocalypse. And it's the idea that civilizations were actually around up to the Ice Age. Most people think of the birth of civilization being Egypt about 5,000 years ago. And there's a lot of evidence, including, I think, Goblet Tepe, it's called in Turkey, that they're now dating to like almost 12,000 years ago. And I think that there are definitely some lost cultures and some lost wisdom that we have that I did that just fascinates me. The idea that people have been around that long in civilized forms and not just the idea of a caveman or
And I think, yeah, and our natural, I think, bias is the fact that, oh, people have just gotten smarter and smarter over the years, and we often discount, even in terms of, I'm pretty fortunate. I'm having Andrew McLuhan, a grandson of Marshall McLuhan, in my class today. And I'm sure that somebody like Marshall McLuhan, who's 50 years ago, was a big thinker, but we don't think we think that now is sometimes 50 years ago. What did they know then? Never mind 12,000
yeah.
years ago. And I don't know if that's the case. I think people figured out a lot of things without the comfort and technologies of our day that we probably don't want to lose that. And what might we learn from somebody who lived 5,000, 12,000 years?
You think of like indigenous knowledge, and it just blows me away.
Yes,
I
that's
love
right.
the book Braiding Sweetgrass, and if you're not into audiobooks, there's your first audiobook because it's poetry to listen to, and they talk about the in that book, and I think is where I got it, but the three sisters, and so they grow. I think it's pumpkin, beans, and corn together like those go together. And the fact is, it's the beans that fix the nitrogen that the other plants need. And like, how do they know that to call them
Right.
sisters and to put them together and to understand that they will actually feed each other? That's not something that happens in one generation, right? That's something that's
That's right.
thousands of years of wisdom to come to those conclusions. I mean, you think of the scientific mind to recognize that, and then to share stories that they're actually sisters. Just amazing. And so that part
Unbelievable.
of history and that part of understanding that some of these old cultures bring a wisdom and understanding to the world, it really excites me.
Last
Yep.
question. Hidden gem in Coquitlam, someplace a person should check out in the
Here's the thing: there are many because we have some phenomenal hiking trails, right? And Bunsen Lake is a lake that is 15-minute drive away, and there are all kinds of. There's a beautiful vista hike. There's waterfalls around. There's all kinds of different places that you can go. But I would say just as a quick answer, Bunsen Lake and all of the hikes and things around there, it's just a hidden gem that when you're there, you feel like you've gone to cottage country and you've only driven 15 minutes out of downtown Coquitlam. So there you go.
That's awesome. Hey,
Yeah.
Dave, this has been great catching up. I know you've been very persistent in your invitation, and I promise I will take you up on this. I promise I will come see the cool work you're doing. And again, I thank you for that. You've just been a leader in that. You've been one of the few people, maybe only 5 in the whole country, who've been blogging as long as we have and consistently. And we'll put Chris Kennedy and Stephen Downs on that
Yes.
list. Probably about the I don't know. There's maybe more, but those are about the only few that come to
Yeah.
mind. So I appreciate you doing that. And yeah, all the
Yeah.
best.
Thanks so much. Take care.